The museum's cameras didn't glitch. They obeyed. Every feed that faced the Egyptian wing recorded the same thing. A clean, perfect rectangle from 9:17 p.m. to 9:46 p.m. No static, no frozen frames, no signal lost banner. Just darkness. Like someone had cupped a hand over the lens and held it there until the worst part was finished. And when the picture returned, the gallery looked untouched. No broken glass, no footprints, no frantic shapes crossing the floor. Only a velvet rope swaying gently in the amber light, back and forth as if something had passed through it without lifting it. And one man was missing, Chris Dorsey, gone from a locked building full of ancient dead things and modern locks, gone with 2 coins that were never supposed to leave their case. Jaime Ortiz told them what happened, but the truth is a fragile thing when it shows up without evidence. It bruises easily, it breaks, it gets laughed at. And in the end, all Jaime had was a story no one wanted to carry. Jaime worked nights because nights were predictable. The museum after closing was a different animal. In daylight it was an orderly place, loud with field trips and stroller wheels and docent voices practicing enthusiasm. At night it became something quieter and older, a place where every exhibit had a room to feel like itself. The marble floors held onto the day's cold like they didn't trust warmth. The air conditioning cycled with a steady, almost human rhythm like a sleeping chest. And your footsteps came back to you too clearly, as if the building repeated them to make sure you heard yourself moving through it. Jaime liked routines. Routines made the world less sharp. Clock in, walk the loop, check the doors, check the monitors, log the temps, make sure nothing looked disturbed. Most nights were uneventful. Most nights were so uneventful, Jaime could have done them with his eyes closed. But the Egyptian wing always pulled at him. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't like cold fingers on the neck. It was subtler. A feeling that you were being watched, waited for. The wing was long and dim and lined with cases that glowed softly as if they didn't want to wake up. There were amulets and funerary masks and carved statues with blank eyes. And at the center, under the warmest light in the room, sat an exhibit on loan from a private collector. A mummy. Not tall, not theoretical, just small and carefully wrapped, arms folded as if someone had arranged the body and then apologized for touching it. The placard read, Late period 664 to 332 BCE, on loan from a private collection. Beside the mummy's case was a shallow display of 4 coins. Dark metal, worn stamps, the kind of objects that looked unimpressive until you remember they survived centuries while everything around them turned to dust. Visitors leaned closer to the coins than they did to the mummy. Jaime noticed that. He noticed everything. Coins were easier to imagine holding. Coins felt like permission. Jaime had heard a guide once say, half joking, "The dead don't mind being looked at. It's their valuables they get touchy about." At the time, Jaime laughed. That was before he learned what touchy could mean. Chris came to pick Jaime up on a Tuesday. Chris was the kind of friend who treated life like it owed him a little excitement. Loud laugh, fast talk, restless hands. He was also the kind of friend who could talk his way out of a parking ticket and then joke about it for weeks. But lately, Chris had been off. For 2 weeks he kept saying his luck had turned. Flat tires, a lost job, a burst pipe in his apartment that ruined half his clothes, his phone slipping into a storm drain like it wanted to die. Chris started collecting lucky things the way some people collect receipts. A rabbit's foot from a gas station, a chipped saint medal, a smooth stone with a hole in it that he called a hagstone, proud of the word like he discovered it. Jaime didn't believe in luck objects. He believed in cause and effect. But he believed Chris believed. At 8:55 p.m., Chris texted, "Outside, hurry up, I'm starving." Jaime clocked out at 9:05, grabbed his jacket, and stepped into the lobby. Chris stood by the glass doors, staring up at the museum ceiling like it was judging him. "Your job is creepy," Chris said, grinning. "It's a museum," Jaime replied, already walking toward the exit. "It's a building full of dead people's stuff," Chris said. "Different flavor." "We're leaving," Jaime said. Chris didn't move. He looked down the dim hallways branching away from the lobby. The museum lit low for night mode. Everything softened into shadow. "Come on," Chris said. "Just a quick walk. 5 minutes. Show me the mummy thing you told me about." Jaime stopped. "No." Chris's grin sharpened. "Why not?" "Policy." Chris spread his hands. "You're literally the policy. You're here, you have a badge. It's not like I'm breaking in." Jaime felt the familiar tug of being the responsible friend. The one who says no. The one who gets called boring. He hated that part of himself sometimes. 5 minutes, Jaime said. "We walk, we look, we leave. You don't touch anything, you don't wander, you don't do anything stupid." Chris held 2 fingers up. Scout's honor. Jaime didn't ask when Chris had ever been a scout. The museum at night made Chris quieter. Not because Chris was suddenly respectful. Because the silence pressed on him like the way weather does before a storm. They passed the dinosaur hall first. Huge skeletons poised mid-stride. Shadows turning ribs into cages. They walked through European portraits. Painted eyes watched with glossy patience. Faces of long-dead nobles held their expressions as if they had been practicing them for centuries. Then they turned a corner and the Egyptian wing opened like a long throat. The temperature dropped, not dramatically, just enough to make your skin notice. Chris slowed. "There," Chris said, pointing. Jaime led him to the center display. The mummy lay behind glass, wrapped and still. The amber lights made the linen look almost golden, almost kind. Chris leaned in close, studying the mummy the way people study something they want to understand and can't. Then his attention drifted to the coins. Jaime saw the shift and felt his stomach tighten. "Those real?" Chris asked. "Very," Jaime said. "Don't tap the glass." Chris tapped the glass anyway, softly, once, like a question. Jaime's voice sharpened. "Chris!" Chris smiled without looking at him. "Relax, I'm just appreciating." The coins sat under the glass like they were waiting. Chris crouched, squinting. "Look at that one. That's a bird, right? And that's like a sun?" Jaime stayed standing. He was suddenly aware of how far they were from the lobby, how quiet the security desk would be, how thin the museum felt when it was empty. "Okay," Jaime said. "We saw it. Time to go." Chris didn't stand up. Instead, he slid his hand into his jacket pocket. Jaime saw metal, a small screwdriver. Jaime's brain tried to protect him by pretending he hadn't seen it. "What are you doing?" Jaime asked, his voice thin. Chris looked up. His eyes were bright with adrenaline and that restless need to win against the universe. "I'm getting crushed by bad luck," Chris said quietly. "You know that." "I'm not stealing," Chris whispered, like the word itself was dangerous. "I'm borrowing. 2 coins, lucky coins. If these were for the afterlife, then they're already paid, right?" Jaime felt his mouth go dry. "Put it away." Chris's smile flickered. "You don't even believe in this stuff." "That doesn't matter," Jaime said. "I believe in cameras. I believe in getting arrested. Put it away." Chris's hand moved away. He slid the screwdriver into the seam of the lock and pressed. The lock clicked. A small sound, a polite sound, like a door opening in a house where everyone's asleep. Jaime lunged and grabbed Chris's wrist. "Stop!" Chris yanked free. "Jaime, relax. I'll close it. No one will know." Jaime opened his mouth to shout and couldn't. The museum made shouting feel like sacrilege. Chris lifted the glass cover, and cold spilled out. Not temperature cold, a deeper cold, heavy, old, the kind you feel in your teeth. Chris pinched 2 coins between his fingers. They looked darker up close, almost slick, like they'd been kept underwater. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Chris exhaled, triumphant. See? No curse. No. And then the lights dimmed. Not off. Dimmed, as if the museum lowered its eyelids. Jaime's blood thinned. That's not normal. Chris's grin twitched. Okay, that's actually kind of theatrical. And then the mummy's case made a sound. Not breaking, not opening. A soft internal shift, like cloth settling. Jaime turned slowly. The glass fogged from the inside, blooming with condensation as if something warm had suddenly begun breathing against it. A line appeared in the fog. Not a random streak, like a fingertip sliding through steam. Chris's voice cracked. Is that humidity control? Jaime couldn't answer, because inside the case, the mummy's chest rose. Subtle, almost polite, then fell. Chris stumbled backward, clutching the coins. No, no, no. The mummy's head turned. Wrappings creaked like old paper. It angled toward Chris's hands, and then from behind the glass came a breath. Not a groan. A dry scrape like sand shifting in a jar. Jaime grabbed Chris's arm. Put them back. Chris's fingers tightened. I can't. Put them back. Chris jerked, panicking, and dropped one coin. It hit the marble with a sharp clink that echoed too far. The mummy stopped moving. Jaime's heart slammed. Okay, good. It wants them back. Chris stared at the coin on the floor, then at the other still in his hand. Then fear made him stupid. Chris shoved the remaining coin into his pocket. The mummy's head snapped toward him. The motion was wrong, too fast for something that should have been stiff. The glass case was sealed one moment, not sealed the next. No latch movement, no hinge sound. Just open, as if the building itself had decided it wasn't going to stand between a debt and its collector. A smell rolled out. Not rot, not decay. Something older. Hot dust, cold metal, sealed paper. The mummy stepped out onto the floor, feet landing with a soft, heavy cloth sound. It stood upright, steady, certain. Its wrapped face turned slightly, as if smelling the air through fabric and centuries. Then it spoke. Low syllables in a language Jaime didn't know, but he understood the meaning anyway, the way you understand a threat without translation. Chris backed up. Jaime, do something. Jaime yanked him. Run. They ran, but the museum ran too. Lights dimmed in the direction they tried to go. The hallway ahead of them looked longer than it should have, shadows deepening as if the building was stretching its throat. A motion sensor tripped and lights snapped on behind them, spotlighting the mummy like a stage cue. Chris looked over his shoulder and made a noise that wasn't a word. The mummy didn't sprint. It didn't lunge. It simply closed distance with impossible efficiency, like time leaned in its favor. Jaime hauled Chris towards the lobby. Chris jerked free, veering left, deeper into the wing. No! Jaime shouted. This way! Chris didn't hear him. Or he did and chose wrong anyway. Chris barreled into a staff-only door. It should have been locked. It swung like it had been waiting for him. Chris vanished into the dark storage corridor. Jaime hit the doorway and froze. The storage space was unlit. Deep shadows between shelving rows and crates. Chris's breathing echoed inside, ragged and wet. Chris! Jaime shouted, stepping forward. Something moved in the dark. Chris stumbled into the doorway's spill of light, face pale, eyes huge. He reached for Jaime with both hands like a drowning man reaching for shore. And behind him, the mummy emerged. One wrapped hand rested on Chris's shoulder. Not gripping, claiming. Chris's mouth worked. I'm sorry, he rasped. Jaime, I'm sorry, I didn't think. The mummy spoke again, low and ancient. And Chris's apology stopped, not because he chose silence, because his breath vanished like a candle snuffed between two fingers. His eyes stayed wide on Jaime. Then the mummy guided him backward into the dark. Not dragging, not violent. A quiet escort, the way a priest leads someone to an altar. Jaime took a step forward. The mummy turned its head toward him. Jaime saw beneath the wrappings just enough to ruin sleep forever. Not a skull, a face flattened by time, and eyes that were not eyes. Dark, reflective hollows that caught light and returned it wrong. The mummy looked at Jaime like it was deciding whether he was part of the debt. Then it looked down, at the coin on the gallery floor. It stepped away from the storage doorway, slow and careful, as if retrieving the fallen coin was more important than chasing a witness. Jaime's lungs remembered how to live. He ran. Jaime sprinted through the museum like it was no longer his workplace, like it had become something else, something hungry. He reached the security desk and slammed his hands down so hard the pens jumped. Walt, the night guard, jolted upright. "Jesus, Jaime!" "Call the police," Jaime gasped. "Chris is gone. The mummy took him." Walt stared, then frowned. "What the hell are you talking about?" Jaime grabbed Walt's sleeve and hauled him toward the monitors. "Look," Jaime begged. "Look at the Egyptian wing." Walt tapped keys and pulled up the feeds. Every camera facing that wing was black. No static, no flicker, perfect darkness. Walt leaned in, suddenly fully awake. That's not right. Jaime's stomach dropped into ice. "It's doing it. It's hiding." Walt switched angles, different hallways, different corners. Every camera facing that wing was black. Then the screens blinked, and the gallery returned. Empty, quiet, normal lighting. The mummy back in its case. The coin display closed. No Chris, no movement. Only a velvet rope slowly swaying in the frame. Walt stared at that rope too long. Then he looked at Jaime like Jaime had become a problem with a pulse. "Where's your friend?" Walt asked. Jaime's voice cracked. "He was right there." Walt stood slowly. "Jaime, did you bring someone in after hours?" Jaime swallowed. "Yes, but..." Walt's face hardened. He grabbed his radio. "Control, I'm heading to Egyptian." The walk back felt wrong. Not because Jaime was imagining it. Because the museum felt reset. Like it had rearranged itself while Jaime wasn't looking. When they reached the Egyptian wing, everything looked pristine. The mummy lay still behind glass, hands folded. The coin case looked untouched. Jaime stumbled toward it, hands shaking. "No, he took two. He took them." Walt checked the lock. No tampering. Jaime turned to the floor where the dropped coin had been. Gone. Jaime whispered, "It picked it up." Walt stared at him. "Who did?" Jaime couldn't make the words sound sane. "The mummy," he said. Walt's gaze slid away, like looking at Jaime too long might infect him. They searched. Storage rooms, back corridors, restrooms, emergency exits. Chris was nowhere. No forced doors, no alarms, no broken windows. Just absence. And that was the part the police hated most. Because absence doesn't testify. By sunrise, Jaime sat in a clean office that smelled like coffee and polished wood. The museum director listened with a face built for bad news. Jaime told the story. Every detail, every sound, every moment his brain tried to reject. "Chris came to pick me up. We walked. He opened the case. He took the coins. The mummy woke up, and it took him." The director didn't argue. She didn't need to. She let Jaime finish, then slid a laminated incident from across the desk like he was feeding a parking ticket into daylight. "Jaime," she said calmly. "You brought an unauthorized guest into the building after closing. That is the only confirmed fact. My friend is missing, Jaime rasped. We have contacted the authorities, she replied. Now I need to know if you propped any doors. Jaime stared at her. What? Did you prop any doors? She repeated, tone unchanged, like human grief was background noise. I watched him get taken, Jaime said, voice rising. He was breathing, and then he wasn't. Walt stood behind her, hands clasped, staring at the carpet. Jaime turned. Tell her the cameras went black. Walt's jaw flexed. He didn't look up. The director tapped her pen on the paper. The cameras did not record any intruder. Because they went black, Jaime snapped. All of them, at once. The director's expression softened in a practiced way. The way people soften before they say something that ruins your life. Jaime, she said. Inventory was completed this morning. All items are present. Jaime blinked. No. 4 coins, she said. Counted, documented. Jaime felt the floor tilt. That's impossible. The director slid the termination papers forward. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated. Jaime didn't touch the papers. He looked at Walt again. Walt, he whispered, begging now. Please. Walt finally lifted his eyes and quietly said, We didn't see anything, Jaime. Not I didn't. We. Like the whole building had agreed on the lie. Jaime walked out of the museum into morning sunlight, feeling like he'd left his friend behind in a sealed room no one would ever open. Days became weeks. Chris stayed missing. There were posters, vigils, and online threads full of theories. Theories were easier than mummies. Most people chose the simplest story. Chris wandered off. Chris got into trouble. Chris met someone dangerous. Jaime knows more than he's saying. No one chose a story where a debt collector wrapped in linen walked out of a glass case and retrieved what was taken. Because that story makes the world feel porous. Jaime stopped sleeping. When he did sleep, he dreamt of black screens. He dreamt of velvet ropes swaying. He dreamt of cloth scraping stone. He dreamt of a storage corridor that never ended. He tried to tell himself it was trauma, grief, shock. But sometimes, late at night, when everything in his apartment was still, he swore he could hear something that didn't belong. A soft drag, like fabric moving over tile. A quiet clink, metal on stone. Like someone placing something down carefully. Like someone counting. At 3:12 a.m. one night, Jamie's phone buzzed. Unknown number, no text, just a photo. A close-up of a hand holding 2 coins. Ancient, dark, worn. And behind them, blurred but unmistakable, a strip of pale cloth. Jaime sat up so fast his chest hurt. He tried calling, no connection. He tried texting, message failed. He zoomed in until the pixels broke apart. On one coin, beneath the worn face, was a tiny mark. Not ancient, not part of the stamping. A clean, fresh scratch shaped like a letter. AJ. Jaime dropped the phone, because that was Chris. Chris had always been the kind of person who left marks, little jokes, little signatures, a way of saying, I was here. Jaime stared at the phone on the carpet like it might bite him. Then he whispered, Chris? No answer. But from somewhere deeper than the city noise, deeper than the building's pipes, Jaime heard it. A faint scrape, and then, very softly, a single careful clink, like a coin being placed down. Jaime couldn't stay away forever. He went back to the museum on a gray afternoon when the sky looked like wet cement. He told himself he just wanted closure. He told himself he wanted to prove to his own brain that it had cracked and invented a nightmare. The front desk guard stopped him before he could step past the lobby. You're not allowed inside, the guard said politely. You were terminated. Jaime tried to smile. It came out wrong. "I just want to see one exhibit." The guard didn't budge. "Sorry, I can't let you in." Jaime backed out into the cold, hands shaking, and stood on the sidewalk staring up at the museum's tall windows. From outside it looked harmless, educational, civilized. A building that held history and returned it in neat little paragraphs. Jaime stared at the highest window of the Egyptian wing, the one that always caught the afternoon light, and for a second he thought he saw movement behind it. Not a person, not a shadow. A pale vertical shape, still, watching. Jaime blinked hard. The window was empty again. He stood there long enough that people started walking around him. He finally turned away, and as he did, his phone buzzed again. Unknown number. This time it wasn't a photo. It was a voice message. Jamie's thumb hovered over it like it was a live wire. He pressed play. At first there was only silence. Then a sound, faint but close. A dry scrape like cloth moving. A low inhale that didn't belong to lungs. And then, under it, so quiet Jaime had to hold his breath to hear it. A man's voice. Chris's voice. Not speaking words, just breathing, slowly, like someone trying not to be heard. And then a sound like metal on stone. One clink, then another, counting. The message ended. Jaime stood on the sidewalk with the museum behind him and the city in front of him, and his heart trying to climb out of his chest. He hit replay. The file was gone. Just an error message. Unable to play media. Jaime looked up at the museum window again. The Egyptian wing window caught the gray light like an eye. And somewhere in that building, behind the glass and the placards and the polite educational language, Jaime knew something was still balancing a debt. Not with violence, with patience, with accounting. Because the dead don't always haunt. Sometimes they collect. If you ever visit a museum after hours, keep your hands in your pockets. Some exhibits aren't here to be admired. They're here to be obeyed. Good night. And if you want more stories like this, hit subscribe. I'll see you in the dark.